Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 8 of the Interviews Playlist. Our special guest for today is Ryan. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So hi everyone, my name is Ryan Palazzolo, and I am a master's student in the Faculty of Science at the University of Windsor, in the Translational Health Sciences program. And I'm also a research associate with the WeSpark Health Institute.
Awesome. So let's start from your very beginning. What high school do you go to?
I went to Holy Names High School in Windsor.
Awesome. So moving from like high school to first year at university, this transition, what do you believe are some stuff you missed from high school, some stuff you wished that your first year university had, and what are some stuff that you were like, I would say, surprised that first year university gave you, which you didn't have in high school?
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of academics, I guess I'll start there. I think in high school, it's kind of easy to float through high school without spending a lot of time on, coursework and extra things outside of school because there's a lot of, hand holding. The teachers give you a lot of instruction. There's a lot of reminders and that sort of thing. I think the biggest kind of wake up call for me entering university was how independent it is and how I realized that my study skills were not as developed as I thought they were. Although I excelled in high school, it was a wake up call for me in university because those strategies were not going to work in an environment where so much learning is independent and you have to keep on top and stay organized. So I think that was kind of the biggest transition for me. And seeking, there's so many external sources at the university that I felt high school didn't have. Like there were so many more opportunities to be giving back, and to be gaining a lot of useful skills by getting involved in different clubs and things of that nature, undergraduate research. And so getting those opportunities kind of help you develop like holistically, outside of that academic piece. So I think that was something that was great with the University of Windsor specifically.
Awesome. So yeah, what are some volunteers and extracurriculars you had in your high school which helped you develop your character entering first year?
Yeah, so I did a lot of community volunteering. My aunt was a kind of a volunteer coordinator, so to speak, and she was involving me in so many different things, like the We Care for Kids walk, or juvenile diabetes, or working with Alzheimer's Society. So I attended a lot of those different outreach events, and although in those roles, I was more of a support. So I would help, move items or help hand things out. Like I wasn't, as front line as maybe some of the staff or something like that. But it really gave me an exposure to the importance of science and research, like those pieces I learned kind of young. And it gave me maybe a leg up in terms of my interest. Like I knew for sure that I wanted to do something science related because of that. I saw, how much it impacted the community and where all these funds that were being raised, where they were going and how it was advancing, the lives of patients with an, array of different conditions. So that was something super helpful. And then I also I went to Muskoka Woods in high school. I think like a lot of different high schools go there, and it's a chance to be a leader for high grade school students. Sorry, and you kind of oversee them for the week, doing different activities and staying with them in the cabin, kind of being like a mentor a bit. So I thought that was a great opportunity as well to enhance some leadership. But outside of that, I really didn't. I didn't devote as much time to volunteering in high school as I did in university.
Awesome. Yeah, those are very great experiences, and I can imagine how they helped you develop your character. All right. So yeah, moving into first year, let's talk about the like big group, big class sizes. How did you adapt with that, moving from high school, which I believe didn't have many students in your classroom, into big classes, and even developing your connections with new people whom you didn't know before?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's another kind of shock when you go to university, how many students are in your class and how difficult it is to get to know the professor. And it's not actually difficult. You just perceive it as difficult because there are so many people. So it's definitely intimidating going up to the prof. I sort of feel like in first year, I felt like I didn't want to waste their time and that I, kind of kept to my group of people that I knew in the class and we tried to answer questions with each other. But I remember as my years went on and I, realized that the profs are really there to support you. Using them as a resource was such a good idea, and I should have been doing that from the get-go. But I think that was the big difference because I've always been the student that asks a lot of questions. And in high school, I was comfortable going to my high school teachers and asking questions. And that was something that was for sure missing in my first year. And yeah, something that I wish, I would have thought more about. Although they like the professors were as welcoming as they could be. They had office hours. They mentioned that no students go to their office hours and that they want people to come. But I guess, yeah, you don't really, that intimidation factor doesn't really go away until you kind of get used to it. So yeah, that was kind of a big thing for me.
Yeah, certainly. How did you get introduced in or exposed into research, and what are the steps you took to get your foot into the world of research?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think a lot of people think that getting involved in research is a really daunting task. And it doesn't have to be. I think at the University of Windsor, because we're a relatively small university, there are so many opportunities for students to work directly with professors, like to reach out. And there's way less, students as compared to maybe Western or Toronto, where there are a similar number of faculty and way more students, or even if like the ratio of student to faculty is way greater at these other institutions. So at Windsor, it's great because I reached out to a professor in my third year. I think that was the first year I started doing research. Maybe second year. Yeah. And I reached out. One of my friends was doing their master's in a ecology lab, and I ended up working with her doing field work. So we would go and catch fish and monitor how they ate and different behaviors, which was super interesting. It wasn't really the fit for me, but it was nice to get my feet wet and kind of see how it was working. So I would help analyze the videos, and you would record how many times they would like bite on something or something like that. So that was interesting. And then in my fourth year, I joined a developmental genetics lab where we did like molecular biology research. And that's where I did my undergraduate thesis in my fourth year. And I just sent like a cold call email to the professor and said, "Hi, I would love to do an undergraduate thesis. I'm looking for a supervisor. I read about your research and I find it super interesting. Like, would you be able to set up a meeting so we can discuss more, like that kind of thing?" And it was pretty well received. I got the interview and we chatted about it. And then I had to send my transcripts, and and I was able to join the lab, which was awesome. So I guess my message is to other people: if you are hesitant to reach out, just send the email. That it can't hurt. And the odds are that they respond to you and say, not right now, but I'll keep you on a list, or yeah, I'd love to meet and talk. And you set up a 15-minute Zoom call and get to know about their research. That's how you get involved. It's the opportunities are not going to fall in your lap all the time. Like you gotta chase them a little bit. And I think especially with research, that's if you're not like an outstanding scholar student or someone who's being kind of given the opportunity, you have to do a little bit of that back work yourself.
Yeah, for sure. How do you believe that your research in ecology helped you in your thesis of research?
So they were really, really unrelated. I think it was good in the third year just to get an understanding of how things work. So something as simple as, how long does a project take? In a thesis, I was volunteering in this lab for about maybe 6 months. And in that time, we didn't really do much. Like we did a lot of work, but I mean, in terms of results or outcomes, like there wasn't a whole lot of things that go on in 6 months. It's so much work, but the research piece takes so long because you need to do so many steps, and you have to double check and do a lot of different pieces, get feedback from supervisors. So I guess it kind of showed me how the pace at which research moves and why that's the pace, which prepared me a bit for my undergrad thesis, because it was okay that I wasn't, you know, mutating my DNA of interest every week. Like I wasn't getting all these really great milestones each week. It was a long process, and it was a year, and it was so many repetitions of the same experiment, because a little thing goes wrong, or you forgot to plug something in, you forgot to put a certain solution in there, or you mix something improperly. So yeah, there are so many things like that, that it just kind of gave me a general kind of lay of the land, even though it wasn't, the topics were quite different.
Yeah, that is insightful indeed. Okay, so how did your thesis research then prepare you for your master's?
Yeah, I think, and again, the master's research I'm doing now is clinical. So I'm doing like a clinical research project, which again is really different from my undergrad thesis, which was in like molecular biology. But again, it's that understanding the process, understanding, the rigor of research and how much work it requires, and the double checking and the due diligence of lit reviews, and the importance of all those pieces, doing a research ethics board application. And so I had some experience doing those pieces, so when I jumped into my master's, I knew where to go for the REB forms. I was able to fill out a lot of that information. So there's pieces like that kind of transfer over between the projects. And I think just kind of learning how to go through papers, like learning how to read a scientific paper. It's not a skill that we learn in every class, and it's not an easy task at all. So I think doing my undergrad work, I read so many papers, and now in my master's, I'm reading many papers. And it gave me those kind of rudimentary skills of where to look for certain information, or what's important to highlight. When I would first read papers, it would be 3/4 highlighted, and it was not helpful to have that highlighting. It's almost everything. So, yeah, I think learning how to go through it and sift through the information was something that was super helpful to learn in undergrad, and something that certainly carried over into my master's work.
Awesome, yeah. Okay, so moving from your fourth year, which I believe you had a gap year or fifth year after, what do you want to say about this period? Like, how did you spend it, and what's your advice for students who are in your place, like having graduated and not sure yet what to do?
Yeah. So, I kind of go back and forth with this. So my ultimate goal was to apply to medical school. And in my first year, with the learning curve, I think so many students experience this, but I didn't have the grades that I would have liked to have in my first year. And grades that, quite frankly, are not competitive for med school. So there are certain med schools in Ontario that look at, if you take a fifth year and you meet all the requirements that they recommend, like you have to have no pass fail courses, they all have to be like upper level courses, has to be a full course load, like those kind of things. They consider that year for GPA calculation. So it almost offsets the first year marks. And that's kind of what my logic was. I said, if I go back and do this fifth year, I take some upper level science courses, I'll have the opportunity to enhance my GPA. And in this kind of year off, it was during COVID at the time, so everything was online, and the world had kind of shut down. There wasn't many opportunities for me to apply for jobs or anything like that, because I was, the COVID had just started. So I did that fifth year, and it was great, because I kind of went in with a different perspective than I started undergrad. I feel like in undergrad, you're kind of just hustling and you're trying to get through. You're kind of in survival mode in undergrad. And in this fifth year, I felt like I was learning more. Like I felt like I was more receptive to the information, and I was interested more, which was a great sign for me, because it was, like at 21 or 22, it's kind of wild that we're expected to know what we want to do with our lives. Like it's such a daunting kind of question to answer. And it was a bit reassuring to be in these courses and see how interested I was. So I would say to anyone who is, not exactly sure, instead of jumping into a program where you're committing either financially or you're moving places for a program, seek out some resources, or, take a gap year and figure out what exactly it is you want to do. I mean, it is, you can always jump around, like you can change programs and that's fine. But I think I now am kind of like more chasing something because I feel like I have a target now, whereas before I was kind of like letting it take me wherever, like all the experiences I had, I was kind of just feeling out where it would go. Um, but yeah, it's a hard time to decide. There's so many things to consider. So yeah, I guess I would just say like I read a few books about being a doctor. I shadowed a dentist in that time. I shadowed an oncologist as well. And in those experiences, I kind of, ruled out some things. I said, you know what, this isn't for me. And, this is really interesting to me. So yeah, I found that was super helpful, and it gave me a lot more clarity in what my what profession suits me best and what I am the most interested in. So
Awesome. Yeah, that's very insightful indeed. Okay, so about your Masters of Translation in Health Sciences, what motivated you to apply and how's it going so far?
yeah, so the Masters of Translational Health Science is a new master's program at the University of Windsor. It's a 1-year course-based master's, but it's kind of a hybrid program between a course-based and a research-based. They don't categorize it as that. I'm just explaining it like that because it is categorized as a course-based master's, but you get to do a clinical research project. So in a typical master's of science, if you're doing a research-based master's, you would do like bench work or whatever for your 2 years, a thesis and a write-up and a presentation. But for our master's, we got to join an ongoing clinical project. So for my master's, I was able to join 2 projects. One is about the healthcare worker access of critically ill migrant workers. And that's led by Dr. Carolyn Ham at the Windsor Regional Cancer Center. And the other one is studying developmental milestones in infants that were born throughout the pandemic. And that one is also with Dr. Carolyn Ham and Dr. Hema Gangnam, who's a pediatrician. And I mean, this program is so unique. There really wasn't anything like it in Canada when I looked. There is a translational program, I think, at Toronto, but I think it's a 2-year program. So I think this might be the only 1-year program in Canada. And it's so unique in that you get a lot of research experience without having to do a full thesis. Or for example, like I've kind of found that bench work wasn't for me, like that, just the whole kind of the way it is, it's just not for me. Whereas the clinical research piece, it's still research and it's more geared towards, community patient care, towards advancing practice, towards, making policy changes. So it's a little bit more applied, I find, or a little bit more, you can kind of see the impact more in the near future than a basic science project or a science project in the lab, which has, targets and goals that are a little further down the line. So I think it's really unique in that way. And, it as a student, gives me a lot of opportunities to network and to meet with a lot of different professionals and just enhance a lot of, professional skills, organization, professionalism, all of these skills that are essential for working in healthcare, for example, or really any profession. But it gives you experience, interacting with patients or writing REB applications, writing grant applications, reading papers and literature, writing manuscripts, the publishing process. So there's a lot of pieces that, as a potentially future physician, if that route goes well for me, I would be able to kind of hit the ground running with research because I have a lot of that clinical experience now. Which I think is, it's very unique in that way. And I think it offers something so essential for students who are interested in healthcare, but maybe don't enjoy bench work or prefer to have something more community or patient facing. So I think from those angles, it's been such a great experience for me.
Awesome. Yeah, since you had experience in wet lab and dry lab research, what are the pros and cons for each? And what's the major difference between course-based and research-based masters? And what's your advice for students considering either one of them?
Yeah, so I mean, the pros and cons between like wet lab research and maybe clinical research is, I think, up to everyone's discretion. This is kind of my opinion. I think that wet lab research is very independent in my experience. I think, yeah, not everyone's going to have the same experience depending on the lab you're in, depending on the topic and that sort of thing. But in my experience, it was very independent and, a little bit tedious, a little bit, yeah, I'm trying to think of the right word to describe it. Kind of repetitive. Like there's so many repetitions of the same protocol, but at the same time, you get to like I worked with like on a Xenopus model, which is like frogs, and so I was injecting frog eggs. So it's really cool. Like you learn a lot of interesting skills in bench lab research. You kind of get more behind the scenes of how things are developed. You get a better sense of those why some of these questions are so hard to answer, like why isn't cancer cured, for example? Why are all cancers not curable? When you work in a wet lab, you understand how long that takes and how many pieces go into the complexity of it and that sort of thing. So I appreciate the knowledge I gained from that experience. I think it's a very unique skills you learn, like the tedious kind of pipetting and running gels, Western blots, like those kind of things are so interesting to learn. But I kind of saw it as a class in my thesis. I felt like it was just a course and I was gaining these skills. But very great to have. Like I am so grateful for that experience. It was awesome. And then flipping the script to the clinical projects, I think the pros of that is that you get to kind of respond to a community need in some way. So for both of my projects, we identified what a need in the community is or what a problem is, and we're using research to help answer that question or to help solve the problem or implement some sort of change or something like that. So I kind of like that aspect of it. It's more you're giving back to the community. You're trying to enhance the lives of patients locally. And I really like those types of projects. I think they're a little bit more collaborative, or not more collaborative than bench research, but like in my experience, my team, like there are so many more members of the team and it's super diverse in our clinical project. For example, on this project studying critically ill migrant workers, we have someone who is from social work, someone who works in bioethics, a few oncologists, we have a policy expert, we have medical students, master students. So around the table, we have so much diversity and so many different angles to look at this problem. And I really think that's how these really complex problems are going to be solved, is by bringing all these, different minds to the same conversation. And that's something I really like about my project. I'm learning so much from everyone else around the table, what perspectives they have and ideas they have and pieces that, I wouldn't have considered. So I like that piece of clinical research, and there's a lot more discussion and more ideas. And, I got a little bit more of a chance to contribute to the direction of the project in this clinical setting. But again, if you're doing a master's in bench work, I think there is more autonomy in where you go with it. I think since mine was an undergrad thesis, they kind of gave me the project. So those are just some differences. I think they're both incredibly valuable experiences to have. And I'm very grateful that I've, been able to do both, because you kind of get the experience in the lab doing I did a formal thesis write-up where you're writing really academically. And then in this clinical project, there's some academic writing, but you're also writing in layman's terms because you have to communicate with patients or communicate with the public. So it's a little bit different and it teaches different skills. So I think they're both, incredibly valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's very fruitful that you have different experiences on your plate and you have been involved in different types of research.
Yeah. I think, it's good to, get out there and get as many experiences as you can in these different areas. Especially, it's valuable for me to say, like, I tried bench research. I learned so much from it, but it's not for me. So just being able to cross something off the list is incredibly helpful. And, gaining skills in that area, something that I wouldn't have gained these skills, elsewhere. So it's kind of nice that I have that to look back on and, reflect on how that has enhanced my ability to learn moving forward. So that's been great.
Yeah, that's an advice I usually give to students, like especially first year students, that there's nothing that you can regret in terms of experiences. Even if it doesn't work out for you, at least you'll gain something from it, and it will give you the opportunity to try something else. And the skills you gained in that experience will be beneficial for you in your future endeavors.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for your time, and it was a pleasure having you as like a speaker on my channel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mutazim.